Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a topic that is not just a chapter in a history book, but a powerful, ongoing story that has shaped the world we live in, the civil rights movement. It's a story of incredible bravery, heartbreaking struggle, and ultimately, a testament to the power of people demanding change. So, grab a seat, and let's get into it. To really understand the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, we have to go back further. After the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, the promise of freedom and equality for African Americans was quickly undermined. A period called Reconstruction brought some progress, but it was short-lived. By the late 1800s. A system of laws known as Jim Crow laws emerged, mostly in the South. These laws enforced racial segregation. Imagine separate schools, separate water fountains, separate entrances for buildings, separate everything. And separate almost always meant unequal, with facilities for black people being consistently underfunded and inferior. This wasn't just about inconvenience. It was a system designed to dehumanize and oppress. On top of that, there were literacy tests and poll taxes designed specifically to prevent African Americans from voting, silencing their political voice. The threat of violence, from intimidation to lynchings, was a constant, terrifying reality. This was the world that the civil rights movement was born into, a world crying out for justice. The fight for civil rights wasn't a single event, but a long, slow burn of countless acts of defiance. Early organizations like the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded in 1909, began chipping away at the legal foundations of segregation. Their strategy was brilliant, using the court system to challenge Jim Crow laws. The turning point came in 1954 with a landmark Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. The court declared that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, effectively outlawing segregation in public schools. This was a monumental victory. It sent a shockwave across the country, signaling that the highest court in the land was finally acknowledging the injustice of segregation. It was a beacon of hope, but the ruling on paper was one thing. Making it a reality would be another battle entirely. The Brown v. Board decision lit a fire. The next year, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, a 42-year-old seamstress named Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat to a white man. Her arrest wasn't just a random act. Parks was a seasoned activist, and her defiance was the spark that ignited the Montgomery bus boycott. For 381 days, the black community of Montgomery refused to ride the city buses. They organized carpools, walked miles to work, and stood united. It was an incredible display of economic pressure and nonviolent protest. Leading this boycott was a young, charismatic preacher, new to the city. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his philosophy of nonviolent civil disobedience, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, would become the moral compass of the movement. The boycott ended in victory when the Supreme Court ruled that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. It proved that ordinary people, united in purpose, could challenge and defeat an unjust system. The movement gained momentum. In 1960, for black college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, sat down at a whites-only lunch counter and politely asked to be served. When they were refused, they simply stayed in their seats until the store closed. The next day, they came back with more students. This was the beginning of the sit-in movement, and it spread like wildfire across the South. Young people, both black and white, bravely faced harassment, verbal abuse, and physical attacks, all while remaining peaceful. Then came the Freedom Rides of 1961. Activists rode interstate buses into the segregated southern states to challenge the known enforcement of a Supreme Court decision that had ruled segregated buses unconstitutional. They were met with horrific violence. Buses were firebombed, and riders were brutally beaten by mobs, sometimes with the complicity of local law enforcement. But they didn't back down. The images of this violence were broadcast across the nation and the world, shocking the conscience of many Americans and forcing the federal government to act. The year 1963 was perhaps the most pivotal year of the movement. In Birmingham, Alabama, one of the most segregated cities in America, Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, launched a campaign of marches and sit-ins. The city's public safety commissioner, Bull Connor, responded with ruthless brutality. He unleashed police dogs and high-pressure fire hoses on peaceful demonstrators, including children. Again, the images horrified the nation. While in jail for his part in the protests, Dr. King wrote his powerful letter from Birmingham jail, a profound defense of the moral necessity of nonviolent protest against unjust laws. The pressure from Birmingham and other protests culminated in the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in August 1963. Over 250,000 people, a sea of humanity, gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. It was here that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. He spoke of a day when his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. His words echoed across the nation, becoming an anthem for the movement and a timeless call for equality and justice. It was a moment of profound hope and unity, a powerful demonstration of the moral force of the movement. The momentum from the March on Washington helped push forward landmark legislation. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. This was a groundbreaking law. It outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It banned segregation in public places and made it illegal for businesses to discriminate. It was a massive victory, a legal dismantling of the Jim Crow system. But the fight wasn't over. Securing the right to vote was the next major hurdle. In 1965, activists organized a march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, to demand voting rights. On a day that became known as Bloody Sunday, peaceful marchers were brutally attacked by state troopers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The televised violence once again galvanized the nation. In response, President Johnson addressed Congress, calling for a federal voting rights bill, and even using the movement's own slogan, "We shall overcome." Soon after, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. This law eliminated literacy tests and other discriminatory barriers, and it gave the federal government the power to oversee elections in areas with a history of voter discrimination. The impact was immediate and dramatic, as black voter registration skyrocketed across the South. It's important to remember that the civil rights movement was not a monolith. While Dr. King's nonviolent approach was central, there were other powerful voices and philosophies. Figures like Malcolm X, associated with the Nation of Islam, initially advocated for black separatism and the right to self-defense by any means necessary. His message of black pride and empowerment resonated deeply, especially in urban northern communities. Though his views evolved over time, his critique of systemic racism and his call for self-reliance were incredibly influential. There were also groups like the Black Panther Party, which, while known for their armed self-defense patrols, also started vital community programs like free breakfast for children and health clinics. These different approaches, though sometimes in tension, all contributed to the broader struggle for black liberation and equality. The late 1960s were a turbulent time. The assassinations of Malcolm X in 1965 and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968 were devastating blows that sent shockwaves of grief and anger through the nation, but their legacies endured. The civil rights movement fundamentally changed the United States. It tore down legal segregation, secured voting rights for millions, and opened doors to opportunities that had been systematically denied. It also inspired other social justice movements, from the women's rights movement to the LGBTQ+ rights movement, and movements for justice around the globe. But the story doesn't end there. The fight for true equality is ongoing. We still see the echoes of that history in the systemic inequalities that persist today in housing, in education, in the justice system, and in economic opportunity. The civil rights movement teaches us that progress is possible, but it is not inevitable. It requires constant vigilance, courage, and a commitment from each of us to stand up against injustice. It's a reminder that the dream Dr. King spoke of is a dream we all have a role in building. Thanks so much for watching. This is obviously a huge topic, and we've only just scratched the surface. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Who are some of the unsung heroes of the movement that inspire you? Until next time, take care.